Thank you so much, everyone, and for the opportunity to speak here at this conference. I just want to start by saying that was incredible last presentation. Mixing family and business is something that absolutely terrifies me, worse than public speaking. So just a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for people who are able to do that and do that successfully. That's really incredible, so thank you so much for sharing that. I'm really grateful for the opportunity today to speak on a topic that I am extremely passionate about, and this is about food safety culture. I think that this is maybe a topic that people will roll their eyes at or maybe want to tune out or check out of mentally. And I'm hoping that this is presenting it in a way that's different enough and hopefully engaging enough to be interesting, to leave you all something, help you walk away with this with a little more information and maybe a little energized to really understand what is food safety culture and why does it matter. Here's my agenda, the things I want to talk about today. I want to introduce myself to all of you a little bit better, get to know you better, talk about the why. Why does this matter? Why am I up here talking about this? And then letting you know where to start, defining success, finding your best practices, and then opening it up to questions at the end. To tell you a bit about myself, I have a bachelor's and master's degree from Brigham Young University in food science. I then, immediately after I graduated college, worked at a startup company called Chipool Farms. Back then, they were just Chipool, but now they are Chipool Farms. If any of you are big Shark Tank fans, you maybe remember a kind of a hippie-looking guy, long hair, on Shark Tank pitching protein bars made out of crickets. That's Pat Crowley, the founder of that company. We made protein bars made from crickets. We thought that we were going to change the world with it. It was, complete amino acid profile. It was sustainable, and I think we made a really great tasting product. But as a surprise to no one wanted to eat crickets. People thought that was gross. After that opportunity, I moved to General Mills, actually, and over the last couple of years, got to work on a variety of projects, starting from cereal, working on Lucky Charms and Golden Grahams, Cinnamon Toast Crunch. And then I went to bars again, a brand called Larabar, got to work on them as well. And then yogurt, and most recently, refrigerated dough, learning about what it's like to work in a bakery. And one thing that was really exciting is that at each and every one of those opportunities, I thought I knew a lot about food safety. I thought I knew a lot about food manufacturing. And every new opportunity has taught me that I really didn't know a lot about it and that there's still so much to learn from those opportunities. And now most recently, I took the role as a quality director at Built Brands. We make protein bars not from cricket flour. Instead, we use whey protein isolate. Thank you. And one thing, I'm very passionate about this. I really believe in the product. I've got samples if you want to try it, but it is unlike any protein bar you've ever tried. It's got this marshmallow-like texture, under 150 calories, just something I'm really excited about, I'm really happy to share with everyone. Just a little bit more personally, my wife and I, we have two dogs that we love to spoil beyond belief. We have a golden doodle and a labradoodle, and then we're huge travelers, and we've actually lived in 8 states in the last 7 years. And I say live in a state, meaning we had a lease there, we changed our mailing address, and that's just because we love to travel, we love to see everywhere, everything that the country and the world has to offer. All right, starting about why does this matter, I want to pitch to all of you a couple different arguments, hopefully appealing to different thought processes, emotional, logical, those kinds of things. So starting off is, there's a statement from the FDA, the world around us is changing rapidly, and we are in the midst of a food revolution. So one thing is that this is on the FDA's mind. And if it's on the FDA's mind, it'll be on the USDA's mind. And it may not, kind of is a requirement already, but talking about food safety culture, having those policies, starting with the stick and then we'll move to the carrot, it could be a regulatory requirement. It's something that auditors will come into your facility, trainers, people who look at you, they're going to be asking about this. And you want to be armed with a response. Moving it further down is building trust with consumers and employees. Quality is a story that people can get behind. Knowing that your brand and your products have valuable, high quality, safe ingredients inside of them, those are selling points. And that's something I think that we want to deliver on. We want to give that to our consumers. I think about also social media, the impact that has. How would a bad review, how would someone blowing you up on social media impact your business? And how hard would it be to recover from that? And then lastly is to stay relevant. We've talked a lot about COVID. we've listened to some really great presentations on how COVID has disrupted the industry and how it's changed things. And I think for us to stay relevant, it is continuing with this momentum of protecting our people, protecting the brands, protecting the consumers, the people who eat our products, not just from COVID, but from foodborne illnesses. You know, we hear about those scary pathogens like Listeria and Salmonella, but helping protect customers. So from there, talking about where to start, as simple as it sounds, as foundational as it may appear, it is to just have a conversation. I think as owners, founders of your companies, successful business owners, you know, incorporating food safety into your vocabulary, sitting down and talking with people about how much it matters to you. You know, it doesn't need to be this huge, you know, marketing campaign where you spend thousands of dollars, although I'm sure some people would appreciate that. But just even sitting down, having those individual conversations, letting them know to you how much the quality means to your brand, which I'm sure it does for all of you. Knowing how difficult something like a recall would be, or having reviews come through about your products because it's making people sick. Just sitting down and having that conversation, letting them know what it means to you is always a fantastic place to start. You know, and then we talk about more into like the tactical and getting into the weeds of it. You know, having a leadership commitment. And the FDA, working with them, that's a really common thing that they like to see if they come in and audit your facility. Maybe if you worked with other regulatory bodies like SQF or BRC, you know, those are things they like to see. They want to see a management commitment. They want to see this commitment in writing from leadership. You know, that's a nice check-the-box activity, but more so it's putting thought behind that, you know, making it something that you can rally behind and people can get behind. Another place to start is assessing your current culture in your business. This is a really fun exercise I actually like to do with, you know, in my experience, every time I moved from a different department or to a different company, really assessing the culture, because when we talk about culture and we talk about safety, we're all in a different place, and it's all got to be customizable. You know, there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution for this. So that's what this matrix is on the right side, is kind of understanding, you know, how to do an assessment with your team, your employees, your family members. On the top left, starting out with individuals who have a high understanding of food safety. You know, this is your quality assurance team members, you know, the scientists, the people who maybe aren't as exciting to talk to as a scientist myself, but they have a high confidence as well. You know, these people really aren't at a high risk to your business. You know, they know what they're talking about, and they're confident in the information that they have. And then you move to individuals who have a high level of understanding, but maybe don't have as much experience in the business or in the industry and lack some of that confidence. You know, these are people that you can coach and mentor, really help them step up to the plate, develop those skills, and learn where they can share that knowledge and be confident about it and really grow to be an asset to the company. And then on the bottom right, we have individuals who don't really understand food safety. You know, maybe their backgrounds are in food science or microbiology, which is that's not a prerequisite. But they don't really know a lot about food safety. They're kind of new to the game. They're new to food manufacturing or food service. And they also, because they're new, don't have a lot of confidence. You know, this is something we've talked a lot about with training. Giving those individuals that knowledge, helping build them up, giving them that training, giving them that time so they can learn those skills, and then have opportunities to hone that in and develop on it. And lastly is my favorite, people who don't have an understanding but are really confident. This is where I like to put myself with, you know, people who just kind of wing it, you know, don't really understand what they're talking about, but are really confident when they say so. Identify these as highest risk to the business. And, you know, that's what we say here, immediate management focus. That's a nice corporate term to put on this of, you know, maybe, you know, you see people who, because of their voice, because of how loud they are, because of the impact they have, don't have the knowledge and can then cause a lot of damage to the company. Can really impact customers, can impact your reputation and your image. You know, putting it there. And this is an exercise I've always liked to do, not really formally, you know, maybe writing some notes, or even talking about this, sharing this grid with your team members and say, hey, let's assess ourselves. Let's just rank ourselves where we fall in this category and then rank each other. Really seeing, like, as we're starting our food safety journey, as we're starting these conversations, really understanding where we are, and from there, identifying next steps moving forward. Another thing I love to do when you're talking about these journeys is, where appropriate, ask for input on difficult decisions. And I want to emphasize where appropriate, because I know that at a high level in the company, sometimes you have to make decisions that are confidential. You have to make difficult decisions, strategy, especially if you have an issue with your product, making difficult decisions on what to do with that product. We're all afraid of a recall. A statistic that I've gathered kind of just from my experience in the industry is recalls start at $1 million. That's not how much they cost, that's where the cost begins, whether that's loss of sales, damaged reputation, marketing dollars to recover and pivot. But where appropriate, I love, if we've got a difficult decision regarding food safety or food quality, I like to ask them, the person who brought it to my attention, ask them, what do you think? If this were your decision, what do you think we should do? And really help bring them along for that journey and get their input. I'm always impressed with the input and value that people do bring there because most of the time they've got a better idea than I have. And then lastly, of course, educating yourself. We're all here. I appreciate the attention, you listening to me. The FDA put out a really great reference. It's called The New Era of Smarter Food Safety. They talk about capital, they talk about training, get a little more into the weeds of it. Just a really fantastic resource and place to start. Continuing with that is defining success, right? We got this momentum. We're all excited about talking about food safety, or not excited, but we know it's on the horizon. But how do we measure success? How do we know if this is effective or not? I think as businesses, we want to be data-driven. As leaders, we need to know if something is impactful or if it's effective or not. So how do we define success? One thing is, as an industry, a really easy metric is a reduction of recalls. With market events, recalls, I don't know how much you guys know, but every recall from the FDA is pitched as a voluntary recall. The company is like, oh, we voluntarily recall this product. That's almost never the case. It's usually the FDA is like, we strongly encourage you recall this product. And you're like, okay, we will, and we'll voluntarily do it. But as we see this reduction in recalls, COVID, this has actually been a really hot area of debate. What happened in 2021 to 2022? Why was there such a dramatic reduction? And then also from 2020 down to 2021, there's also a reduction. Obviously, we're in 2022 still, so that number will continue to rise as the year progresses. But really talking about what happened in the pandemic, why did we see such a drop there? Like I said, that's something that's been a really kind of controversial debate. So we'll stay a little clear of that. But then as a company, most companies aren't issuing recalls every day, and if you are, I wonder what's happening. But you talk about other metrics internally, consumer complaints, negative reviews on social media, if you're manufacturing product, hold product. If you work through co-manufacturers, how much of their product are they holding? And that's something that you can continue to see as this gradual reduction is because you're putting the right conversations and you're empowering people to say, hey, food safety is a priority to the business. Leadership, they care about this, they're talking about this. I want to make sure I'm doing the right decision. Another way that's not as measurable, but is a really good metric that I see is when I see people doing the right thing unprompted. If I see employees washing their hands properly, counting to themselves or singing the ABCs, or if I see people, if they drop something on the floor, they put it in the trash, and I don't have to wait to step in and say, hey, you can't do that. But that's another thing is culturally you see is people will unprompted do the right thing. And then as leaders, this kind of ties into that is that engagement you see with people, hearing their stories, hearing their success stories, even something as simple as, talking about food sensitivities or food allergies. If you are working in an environment where you work with allergens, do you know what allergens your people have? Do you know what their concerns are? And bringing that personal touch to the table as well, understanding that, hey, this matters to me not because, I have an allergy to gluten, but my wife does, or my nephew does, or I've got family members where this matters to them, and I want to ensure their safety because I know they eat the products, I know that they love this. And then as an individual, I purposely left this blank because I want you all to think about this as an individual, what this means for you. How am I going to be committed to food safety? And like I said, you don't need a degree in science. You don't need a degree in marketing. I think what you need is a passion to make food for people, which all of us here today, I believe, have that. But thinking for yourself, how do I want to embrace this idea of safety to help protect my customers, to help protect my brand, and share that with the people around me? Moving on to best practices, this is something that when I was preparing this presentation, I thought about taking out because I don't want this to sound like I know everything about this. There is still a tremendous amount I have to learn when it comes to food safety and those things to do. But maybe just some mistakes that I've made or things that I've learned over the years that I want to share with all of you. The first one is to not get stuck on what's ideal. I think it's really easy to look to these big companies with unlimited resources, the General Mills, the Nestle's of the world, and say, wow, this is what they do. How the heck am I ever going to accomplish something like that? How the heck am I going to have a huge QA department or a huge regulatory or legal team? And it's easy to look at the gold standard and get discouraged by that. And what I would just say is not getting stuck on what's ideal, really looking at your company, assessing your existing culture, and starting from there, making your own tailor-made solution to it. One thing I will share is that, we talked about these manager commitments, these, incentives. It doesn't have to be explicitly saying, as a company, we are committed to food safety and ensuring that blah, 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 right, and put people to sleep. It doesn't have to be like that. At Built Bar, where I work now, our food safety policy is great products are not manufactured, they are built. That's it. That's our safety policy. And that's what we rally behind, and that's what we say is, we're not just manufacturing something. Earlier we talked about putting love into your product, putting that emotional, putting that personal touch into it. And we say we're not just manufacturing something, we're building great products here. And we don't even mention food safety there, but that's our commitment, that's our policy that we get behind. And that's something that, as our team, we came up with. It wasn't from a handbook, it was something we saw that this is our culture, this is what we need, and this is our plan that we're moving forward with. I also want to talk about incentivizing doing the right thing. And I know when we talk about incentives, our mind goes to dollar signs, and I think money always helps, right? You can reward milestones in food safety, passing big audits, conducting internal audits, conducting, certain activities to help be preventative and be proactive. We obviously don't want to incentivize sweeping things under the rug, you don't want to put dollars in the wrong areas, but when you see people doing the right thing, rewarding them for those behaviors. Something else I really like to do is just giving that personal touch. You see someone doing the right thing, throwing product away after it touched the floor, or washing their hands properly, you go up and thank them for that. Give that personal touch. Hey, I noticed you did this. I just want to say thank you for that. That reward is a huge incentive. And then, if you guys have adopted internal chat systems, Slack, Microsoft Teams, some sort of like company communication system, blast them publicly for it. Reward them. Say, hey, I just want to give a shout out to this individual, their commitment to helping protect our brands, protecting our consumers, and really rewarding them that way, and thinking beyond the dollar, thinking of ways that we really hope to make an impact beside just saying, hey, here's a $10 gift card because you washed your hands, but really making it memorable and helping it stick with your employees. Another thing I would encourage is building/engaging with your network. This is something that I am really grateful for. Is I've been very, the term privileged has come up a lot. I've been very privileged to have a really good network, be surrounded by industry professionals. Really random connection I have is a gentleman named Ken Walters. He helped write HACCP. He was with Pillsbury when NASA approached them about, hey, let's make a food safety plan to protect our astronauts. And it's really random that I got to work with him and got to know him on a personal level. And I'm grateful, and while that's very privileged, I'm also grateful that I can call him up and say, hey, I've got this random question I've never seen before. I've got this situation. What would you do about it? So continuing to build and engage with your network, asking those questions, and not being afraid to share problems or things that are concerning that you have, because I've seen in my experience most of the time they've got better ideas. And then the last thing, just being creative. I think that I've been fortunate to audit facilities, traveling around, looking at compliance. What I don't like to see is when people treat food safety as a check-the-box activity. They say, oh, box is checked, we're good, let's talk about marketing, let's talk about other things. And they really kind of there's not that commitment or that investment. But I like to see the creativity. I like to see when people are thinking outside the box or thinking of other ways to say, hey, let's get people to do the right thing. I want to as I'm wrapping things up, give a call to action. This is something I really strongly believe in and want to share with all of you. I don't know who originally said this quote. I've tried asking some people, but this is something I've heard my entire career, is that there's no competitive advantage when it comes to food safety. As companies, we want to be unique. We want to win market share. We want to drive more revenue, help improve our top line. We want to drive more sales. But when it comes to safety of our products and protecting our consumers, you could argue, food is a basic human right, or food is something we're all entitled to, but I think all of us here today, we're passionate about making food. We're passionate about sharing that with other people. And if one company loses, what we've seen, especially several years ago, is that it's easy to consumers begin to mistrust the companies, especially those big mega corporations. It's easy to mistrust them. And if they make a big mistake, you hear about a recall of lettuce. Maybe we're all worried about lettuce now. We don't care which company it came from, but we're all worried about that. So really sharing that when it comes to food safety, there's no competitive advantage. And that's something that I've appreciated and that I like to share with people is that I call consultants. A lot of the times, if I mention that this is regarding food safety, they do it pro bono. And that's something I've started to do myself and say, I don't want you to not be armed with the right information or be afraid to make the right decision because of financial constraint, but engaging with your network, talking to these people, regardless of cost. Just sharing with all of you, these are my sources to help put this all together. Happy to share this with all of you as well, kind of where I went to put this together, and just reinforcing with my great network. I'm extremely grateful for them for helping me put this together. I'm also grateful for the opportunity to share this information with all of you. And with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions. Yes.
Hey, thank you very much. Food safety happens to be a passion of ours. One of the advantages of working with a distilled product is that we are the cleanser that everybody uses. So I don't have to worry about it so much in my product. We worry about it, on the way to becoming our product. But once it's in the bottle and it's at 80 proof, I don't really worry about it doing anything to anyone. We are starting to get into other products, so much lower ABV products, and I'm looking at, we lived in France for many years, and they have their cheeses that are aged in caves, and they have these things that are put in on old boards, and I'm getting to a point, sorry.
No worries.
When we went and visited a brewery in New York, one of the things that happened to them, and it's starting to happen to us with our Department of Food Safety, they were enforced to use steel and wash down their products and wash everything down and be very, very vigilant about keeping things. They used to do their fermentation in these wooden vats, and they found that the wooden vats were actually more food safe than the steel that was getting wiped down and dealing with that. And I have had a very hard time explaining some of these things to our food people when they are asking us to make these completely clean rooms and completely clean floors, and we're like, it is not as clean as it would be if we were doing it this way, but you can't get through to them because they have it on their checkbox. So how do you get around that culture of it's got to be in a checkbox by FDA, by Oregon Department of Agriculture, or whoever that is running that for the health?
For sure, and I would say quality assurance people are notoriously extremely stubborn. We like to say, this passes, this fails, it's black and white. And I think part of that is helping with a successful food safety culture is really understanding that sometimes these decisions aren't black and white. I think switching from steel fermentation tanks to wooden fermentation tanks, you could easily say that doesn't pass the eyeball test, where this doesn't look right, this is not what I'm used to. Being able to sit down and say hey, I understand this looks different. I understand this is not what you're used to, but if they're data-driven people coming armed with the data, if they are curious people or creative people saying, let's try this and see what happens, build a plan to collect the information. But I would say that's, really understanding is with as you're building and continuing to improve on your food safety culture is, just that conversation outside of this issue that you're working with and saying, when are there situations where it's kind of like there's shades of gray, where it's not as black and white? How do you approach risk? Help me understand your thought process, kind of approaching it that way. Good question. Yeah.
So my question pertains to the scheduled process. How familiar are you with these processing authority bodies, and what are your recommendations for post-scheduled process analysis and verification? Like, do you recommend, microbial analysis or any kind of shelf life testing, so on and so forth?
Yes. This is going to sound like a bit of a cop-out, but it's very risk-dependent. If you were making, yogurt that's ready to eat, high moisture, high water activity, your approach to risk is going to be very different from a baked good that doesn't have a lot of water in it, that doesn't have a lot of, free water, very shelf-stable. So it's very dependent on the product. That's kind of the very generic answer, but diving more into the weeds of it, it's, what you're comfortable with, and it's asking what happens if we fail? Kind of thinking about that question before of could the business proceed without you? What happens if we put this testing strategy in place? Let's say we're doing microbial testing. You're testing your finished product. How comfortable am I if we see a positive? How much product am I comfortable throwing away? And kind of weighing that balance that way versus the cost of testing. If you're testing once a day, that's going to be a lot lower risk where you're only segmenting 24-hour sections at a product versus if you are testing once a year, the risk is much greater if you do have a failure at that point. So that's kind of looking at and seeing what level of risk you're comfortable with. Does that answer your question? I hope it's another story.
Well, Bryan, great presentation. I love it. I had a couple of topics I was going to talk about. One was, I think every CEO should have to work in the QA department of food business before they could be qualified for CEO. I'm serious because that piece, I started my career there. I had no clue what HACCP stood for. I had to go, hazard analysis critical control point. Wow. I mean, what does that mean? It's a very baseline understanding in a food business all leadership should have. So you're the next CEO, man. Stay with it.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.